Hello and welcome to my The Batman spoiler review. I'm Ben Friedman from the Beniverse, and today I am breaking down everything about Robert Pattinson's The Batman. So let's get in, let's get ready, and let's start right after this. So the Batman follows Batman, who ventures into Gotham City's underworld when a sadistic killer leaves behind a trail of cryptic clues. As the evidence begins to lead closer to home and the scale of the perpetrator's plans become clear, he must forge new relationships, unmask the culprit, and bring justice to the abuse of power and corruption that has long plagued Gotham. That is just a brief summary that I found of the movie online just to kind of frame this talk of the movie. As you can see, I'm wearing red because vengeance is the big key of this movie, and red is a color palette that director Matt Reeves quite enjoys with this movie. And I'm just going to start my review with that guy, Matt Reeves. What an MVP direction job he did in this movie. It is impressive what he does with this movie. He comes in and he makes the film wholly his own and completely unique. And that's not to say there's this style, like there's this direction moment that I can point and say, that is Matt Reeves' direction. It is just so singularly focused. The best praise I can have for this movie is it doesn't feel studio at all. There doesn't feel like there's beats that Warner Brothers gave him that he had to complete. -1, I will say just right now, and this is a full spoiler review as I've already mentioned, so spoilers ahead. The one beat of this movie that I did not like was Barry Keoghan as Joker. Now, that's not to criticize the guy who plays Joker, Barry. I liked him in Eternals, and I've liked what I've seen of him before. It was just, I thought this scene in the movie was completely needless and meandering and just set up a future installment that I quite honestly did not need. I thought this movie completely worked without it, and he didn't need to tease that right there. It felt like them saying, Joker's coming, get ready. That's my biggest gripe with the movie. So just straight off the bat, if you're looking at for me to just critique the hell out of this movie, that's my biggest critique of the movie. I have some nitpicks here and there. Besides that, I think this movie's kind of done really flawlessly. The reason it is because Matt Reeves spent the time researching and creating this world and this character in a way that he wanted to do. He's talked about the influence that he's had, whether it's comics like Batman The Long Halloween or Batman Year One. He knows his stuff. This is a guy who's been reading. Whenever you listen to interviews, he drops references to comic issues like Court of Owls, to Frank Miller's run, to Master Race, and to just everything in Batman lexicon. He drops references to the Arkham City games. He drops references to other Batmans, whether it be Ben Affleck's, whether it be Bale's, Keaton's. He talks about all that and how that all came together and influenced his mind and what he wanted to see in a Batman, looking at what he saw in those, pulling those qualities, and also wanting to see something different and what that was for him. He wanted to make a noir detective film. This film feels very Fincher, as I said in my initial review. That's because it does. What he does so well in it is this is a serial killer chase down movie. This is Batman and Gordon chasing down a serial killer who is on the move and always seems to be one step ahead of them. Paul Dano as the Riddler is incredible in this movie. He is so terrifying as the Riddler. That opening scene with him where he just pops out in the mayor's room just out of the black, and he just is sitting there silently for like 2 minutes, and he just all of a sudden when the mayor's off the phone and he just yells, grabs like a blunt object and just charges at him. That scene is terrifying. There's so many scenes with him where you're just watching him and you're like, this guy not only knows how to act and has such a singularly focused vision of what he wants this Riddler to be. He wants this Riddler to be a kind of Zodiac-like figure in this movie, and he portrays him like a complete psychopath. But he's also immensely talented in his intellect, which puts Batman in this weird predicament where he now has to solve a murder with a guy who's challenging him like no one else has. This makes for a really interesting dynamic between Batman and the Riddler. This is one of the first times I think that we've seen in a Batman film where Batman is challenged specifically in his intellect. Because we've had others, like the Joker, who challenges Batman morally and on his principles. We've had others like Two-Face, who challenges Batman on loyalty, friendship, what that means, and trying to save and realizing when a friend has too far gone. Discussions like that have taken place. This is one who is outstumping the world's greatest detective. And in doing so, that allows Batman to be really intelligent in this movie. That's another characteristic of this movie I like. In telling a detective story, we get to see Batman be the world's greatest detective. And that is not to, and I want to be really careful with how I frame my reviews, because I know so often it's easy to just say, this movie is better than that movie, and then you're just, by lifting this movie up, you're tearing down another. I don't particularly want to do that in this review, so I am going to be careful with things that I say. And this point in particularly, we have never seen a Batman movie like this before, and that's not to critique the other Batman movies that came out before it. That's simply to say what Matt Reeves does with this, in this detective feel, allows us to explore someone who's the world's greatest detective. I really like that. That was the Batman that I've been wanting to see, and it's the one that I think has been lacking representation. There's a lot of it definitely in the animated show, Batman the Animated Series. But besides that, we just don't get enough of that, and it's the Batman that I think is the most interesting. And how could I go any further with my review without mentioning Robert Pattinson as Batman? I've heard some critiques on his performance that I'm going to push back a little bit on. The biggest one is that he is a really bad Bruce Wayne. I completely fundamentally disagree with this statement, because we don't actually see him as Bruce Wayne in this movie. There is exactly one scene where I think the true Bruce Wayne is shown. And let me explain that, because Bruce Wayne does actually technically appear out of the costume multiple times in this movie. I think it's probably in total around 5 times. And I'm going to break down a few of those each time and say my argument that was intentional and that was not Bruce Wayne, that was Batman we were seeing. There's scenes where Bruce Wayne is in the Batcave and he's investigating what he sees the previous nights, decompressing, writing down his notes, and studying what he saw either in the ice lounge, what he gathered from Penguin, whatever it may be. In those moments, he is still the detective. He is still doing his job. He is still in the mindset as Batman. When he talks to Alfred in that scene where he says, "I don't care what happens to me," that's a moment where he is essentially saying, I am Batman. Bruce Wayne is nothing to me. This is who I am now. So he acts like he would as a Batman. We don't get to see him unguarded and unsheltered in that mindset anymore. So he is Batman in those scenes. There's the other scene where, of course, Bruce Wayne makes his first public appearance going to the funeral. I don't understand what people wanted from this scene, to be honest. Did you want him going out there being super charismatic, smiling at a funeral, shaking hands, kissing babies, like flirting with women? That would have been so tonally off that, one, it wouldn't make sense for a Bruce Wayne character to be anything less than somber in that scene. And two, it's also because he's also not Bruce Wayne in this scene. He is there investigating, so he is there talking to Falcone as Bruce Wayne, so he has to use the Bruce Wayne persona to get to talk to Falcone. But in all regards, he is the Batman in that scene. He is still doing the murder detective mystery stuff, looking in, trying to figure out who the Riddler's next target is and what the next point of action is going to be to stop him. The one scene I think that we do legitimately see Bruce Wayne is when he is in the hospital with Alfred. That's the one moment where, when they are talking and Alfred reveals the history of the Wayne's family to Bruce, that is a moment in it where it does signify that Bruce is completely let the guard down and he is Bruce Wayne, because he's talking about the murder of his parents, the fear that came with that he would rather die than see someone he loves hurt. And it's a moment where Alfred and Bruce get to just share this moment of love and understanding in each other. And it's one of the softer moments in this film, and it works so beautifully because it's the first time we've really gotten to see Bruce Wayne So in this film, that worked for me. The way he portrays Bruce Wayne in this movie worked for me because I don't really think we got to see it. So the moments that we do see it, it does kind of feel like somebody kind of breaking free from their Batman persona in it, and it makes the moments with Alfred a little bit sweeter. For a character in Andy Serkis's Alfred, who I think isn't necessarily underdeveloped in this movie, he just doesn't have a lot to do because Batman is always out there in the night, which means he just isn't around Alfred for a majority of the movie. This wasn't a story that needed Alfred to be the main focus. And so I'm glad they didn't shoehorn him in and decide to make him a more focus just because it's like, well, we need to introduce the Bruce Wayne Alfred dynamic in this movie. You can save that for the sequels. Focusing back on Pattinson as the Batman, in my personal opinion, he is my favorite live action adaptation of the Batman that we've gotten to see. I think it is so fully realized, and he is able to do so much in that role. This is a Batman story where we get to see his psyches explored in a way that I don't think we've really gone to see outside of the comic books, which I found very special. In this film, he's a younger Batman. He's still making certain mistakes that a Batman in probably 5 years would not make. He's a little reckless. He's a little too angry. He sees himself as vengeance and has to learn through the film that he needs to become more than vengeance for Gotham to accept him and for him to be a light in Gotham, which is kind of his arc in this film, transforming from vengeance to hope. And in those ways, I think Robert Pattinson is able to do so much with so little presence, and presence in the sense that, I mean, we don't get to see a lot of his face. He's always behind the mask, so we have to see his physical performance. And I think what he does in his physical performance is we're able to fully understand and realize who this character of Batman is without needing to see facial expressions come from him. You see his little bit of quietness, his reservedness. He always is thinking a few steps ahead. And they introduce Batman so brilliantly in this film. I love this opening sequence where it's Batman narrating over the city, explaining what he sees. The film starts on October 31st, and he's calling it a cesspool. When the bat signal comes up in the sky, it strikes down fear into the heart of every villain who sees it. And they do it in such a great thing. I love where he describes himself as the shadows. He's not in the shadows. Anytime the shadow is there, he is that shadow, and it strikes fear in the heart of the villains. This opening scene is so good. It's all these villains committing crimes, and they're just looking up. They see the bat signal, and you see their face sink. Even though Batman isn't present, they just have this knowledge that he's out there, and he could be right there in the shadow. So they all just look over to the shadow in fear that he's going to be there. And then when we finally follow the characters that do have to confront Batman, it's the scene from the trailer where Batman says, "I am vengeance," and just knocks the living crap out of that one guy. That scene is so well done. One, because they make this really important sound decision that follows throughout the rest of the film, where whenever Batman walks, his boots make a certain clanking noise, so you always know when he's incoming. It adds this extra level of excitement, adrenaline, and tension because you know that Batman is present. And when he comes out, it's just him against 8 guys, and he just feels imposing. You know this guy's about to take them all out, and this one cocky guy comes out, tries taking him out. Batman destroys him in a fight, just nothing compared, beats him down, and he takes on this whole group and allows this one teenager gang member to run off. Speculation of whether he's Robin? I don't think so, because that's the actor who plays Dick Grayson, I believe, in the show Titans. So realistically, that's not going to be Robin. Either way, that moment is a great moment of just Batman striking fear into the heart of Gotham's villainy. When Batman goes into the crime scene, it's again that scene that we see from the trailers. And this movie doesn't do it as bad as some other movies have done it, but I just wish they could stop spoiling stuff in the trailers. I know it's kind of impossible. You have to market this film. Thus, you need to show scenes from the movie. And when there's so many good scenes in the movie, you probably have to use a few of them in the trailers. I get it. I really wish they didn't, because I really would have liked to see either that scene of I Am Vengeance where he beats down the criminal, or the scene of him just walking into the crime scene for the first time and all the police officers looking at him. I would have liked to see that on the big screen first. Regardless, they put it in the trailers and I have to live with it. And the scene still works completely in the movies. It's just all these police officers distrusting Batman until Gordon comes in and Gordon says he's with me. It sets up right away the dynamic between Gordon and Batman. In this film, they are equals. They are working in tangent and with each other to make sure that the Riddler goes down and that they expose the corruption in Gotham. In this, I like the dynamic between Gordon and Batman. I think it is the most fully realized one that we've gotten to date since the comic books. They pull a lot of this dynamic from their relationship in Frank Miller's comic Year One, where you get to see both Gordon and Batman at a younger point in their careers and working a case together. I like that. I like that dynamic a lot, and I think Jeffrey Wright gets to just shine as Gordon in this movie. He gets to be the tough cop who knows it and has lived this life, and it's kind of beating him down, and you see the weight of the world on his shoulders as he's trying to solve this case, but he still has this optimism in Gotham and this belief that something more can come. And he also knows that the criminals in Gotham are not just the ones in the streets, they're the ones in his office. Thus, he's working to unmask corruption within his precinct as well. And it's the reason why Batman can look at him just straight up and say, you are a good cop. Batman has this camaraderie and trust in Gordon that he doesn't seem to share with many other people in his life. And it makes for a dynamic that is fully realized and just puts you in it. And with that all said, it's a thing that I forgot to mention. This film doesn't deal with the origin of Batman, and I love that decision. I didn't need to see Batman's parents die again. It's mentioned, but you don't have to see it. The origin of the story comes from getting the glimpses of Wayne's past that we do in it without actually having to flash back to it or go into any real depth. I know the origins, you know the origins, we all know the origins. It's now one of the most famous mythos of all time of Batman's parents being killed, so why do I need to see it again? And I'm glad they didn't resort to it, because it's a 3-hour movie and it feels 3 hours, so adding Batman's parents dying was just going to make it feel that much longer and a scene that wasn't necessary. When Batman sees the mayor's dead and is investigating, there's these little tendencies in Robert Pattinson to just be examining the room, to be looking for evidence and keeping it close to the chest. He doesn't want to reveal everything in front of the other police officers and detectives because he doesn't know which ones he can trust. And for people who say that this film doesn't have humor or levity in it, one, I don't know, did you want Batman to be quipping and making jokes in this film? It wasn't necessary. And two, I also just don't know which movie you were watching. This movie has moments of levity in it. There's the scene right at the beginning where Batman is passing by the detective, and the detective's just kind of standing there confused, not knowing what to do, and he kind of just shuffles awkwardly. It's little moments like that that are just great jokes that are throughout this film that add not belly laughs in this film, but just add moments of humor to the characters interacting with somebody like the Batman, because the idea of the Batman is a ridiculous idea in its nature and they don't know how to respond to it. When Batman gets the riddle and solves it, he begins to realize that there's much more to this story than he thought, and that this could escalate in a really bad way, which leads him going to this place that I believe is called the Ice Bar, which is where Carmine Falcone is located, one of the biggest mob bosses in Gotham. Falcone is a character that is featured predominantly in The Long Halloween, and seeing him used in this way is really interesting, and I liked it because I haven't felt like we've gotten a true adaptation of Falcone yet. I know he's been in some of the other movies, but his roles feel so minimal. This one, you feel the presence of Falcone throughout. John Turturro does a really good job of playing a mob boss with a little bit of a dark sense of humor. He does this great job of just being the guy who's at the very top, who you know can't stay at the very top because he has people like Penguin surrounding him who are going to fill that void one day. So you know Falcone is a character that in this movie, I knew he was expendable. I knew he wasn't going to be a character that you follow throughout the series, but having him in this first one is able to introduce the dynamic that he has with the Waynes family, which is really interesting, and also tell kind of the origins of Gotham and how it became this hellhole that we know it to be. And here at the Ice Bar, we are introduced to the character of Penguin, played by Colin Farrell, in an unrecognizable performance. I said it in my other review. I thought this performance was going to be the one that bothered me the most. I thought it was a lot of makeup and prosthetics, and I thought his accent was going to be over the top and this character was just going to be ridiculous. That is not what actually became on screen. He is a perfect Penguin in this role. And yes, the makeup and prosthetics are heavy, but it completely makes that performance transformative. You don't see Colin Farrell once. I saw like a glimpse of what I'm like, okay, that kind of looks like Farrell. Like I can see it in the eyes and the nose right there. But besides that, I'm just like, I don't recognize this guy. And he is a perfect Oswald in just his mannerisms, the way he talks. I love that they portray him more as a crime boss and less as an actual penguin. And he just has this way of speaking that is so comedically rich, ridiculous, and intimidating. He's a fully realized character despite not being really the villain in this movie. He's just a side character in this film. I just can't wait to see more of Colin Farrell in this role. Batman gets the information that he needs out of Oswald, and this is where he's introduced to Selina Kyle, played by Zoe Kravitz, who made so much sense as the role of Selina Kyle. And then when you see her in this movie, she's even better than I was hoping for. I think she's a perfect Selina Kyle. I prefer Selina Kyle when she is the character that is working alongside with Batman and not the one opposed. I think she's more interesting when she is in the supporting role on Batman's side and not a villain. So I liked how they portrayed her in this movie, and I thought their dynamic was great. It gets to explore some of the darker tendencies of Batman and maybe a wish and a longing to hurt criminals, but have that moral code where she kind of tries pushing it out of him, saying that they need to pay and that justice isn't justice unless they pay for their crime. An eye for an eye is essentially her motto, and Batman has to oppose that, even though to some degree he might realize there is something correct in that, but he is unwilling and uncompromising in his approach and not wanting to do that. The Ice Bar is one of my favorite places that we visit within Gotham because it shows the seediness of corruption. We see characters like Gil Colson, the DA, in the Ice Bar, and we get to see moments like that where it's just like, oh shoot, the corruption of Gotham lies deep, and they are all within the pockets of Oswald and more specifically Falcone. They all have connections with him in ways that you wouldn't want a politician to have. It makes for moments like that where you just realize how deep of an issue and crime and conspiracy this all goes into. And the fact that Batman is essentially fighting a losing battle from the get-go. He is not going to be able to clean up Gotham. Gotham is rooted in corruption. And as the film goes on, we get flashes back to the Riddler, where it's the Riddler planning his next few murders. I love how they deal with the Riddler, that he always feels omnipresent, even though he is not on screen for a lot of time. The moments where he is on screen, he is frightening. Just the way he kills, the way he stalks his victims is really unnerving. And then there's scenes where they use social media to have him kind of conveying his message to the world in a way that is rallying people that we don't fully realize the extent of till we get to the end. But there's scenes where people are saying unmask the truth. It's moments like this where you realize Riddler is hitting a cultural zeitgeist in his actions, and that he's getting fringe supporters, and that is all he needs to enact his plan. Also, one of the things that they do so well with establishing the Riddler, you do see the water walls, and they do talk about it on the television where they're talking about the water walls covering Gotham. So it's when that final act comes to fruition, you just realize like, oh, they established it. Because in the first time I saw the film, I was just like, oh, what, these water walls seem very convenient to just have to destroy the city. No, they do establish it, and they do take their time to say that Gotham is surrounded. It's little details like that upon second rewatch where I'm just like, that's really well done, and I'm glad they put the attention on that. So jumping a few scenes forward, where you get Selina Kyle and Batman having this uneasy partnership, and Batman allows Selina Kyle to use the technology that basically works as contacts that allow Batman to see what he's seeing and identify people. It feels very much like the Batman Arkham series, and it makes for some really interesting scenes where Batman gets to see the corruption, realize who is dirty, And it's one of my favorite pieces of just tech that we get to see introduced in this film, and one that I can't wait to see explored further. It feels very video game, which is why I liked it. It felt like I was playing Arkham, where there's the scenes where he's being the world's greatest detective using his technology. The funeral scene is so well directed. It's so perfectly tense, and when you realize that the Riddler is there and something bad is going to happen, that car crashes through and just the DA walks out strapped to a bomb, it makes for this moment where you're just on the edge of your seat, knowing something bad is about to come down and you don't know exactly what it is. And then Batman's able to appear. They has to answer 3 riddles in 2 minutes. And it's the scene where Batman is interrogating the DA with the DA has a bomb strapped around his chest and has the Riddler in his ear. It's this moment where Batman is getting the information he needs out of him and trying to force it out of the DA while also trying to save him from the Riddler. It makes for this interesting duality where he's trying to do 2 things at once and needs to get certain information out. Once Sarsgaard's character realizes that he's going to die, he doesn't want to die a rat because he has family. I love the moment where Batman is interrogating, like, how much was the bribe? And he just says $10,000 just to keep my silence, all this. And there's this moment where Batman realizes this guy compromised his morality for $10,000 a month, which to him just seems a little inconsequential. But it's moments like this where Batman's wealth just kind of becomes immeasurable because he's a billionaire. And it's other moments like that Selina Kyle establishes in this film where she's like, you are rich. Bruce Wayne is rich. And he doesn't feel the problems of the lower class people. Riddler points it out at one time where he's like, Bruce Wayne lost his parents and then got to wail around in a castle where I had the same effect, but then I was stuck in an orphanage where children would die every winter because it's too cold. Moments like these kind of get to the heart of Batman and maybe some of the problematic natures of a character like Batman, where he isn't fully connected. One scene that does that so well is there's this scene where the police officer says that's a tool used for basically pushing down flooring and lifting up flooring. And that's the moment where he realizes, oh, I can use this. And then it showcases the Riddler's crazy, brilliant plan to destroy Gotham. It's moments like that where you're just like, oh, okay, Bruce Wayne would have never known that because he's never worked with a tool like that. That's what I liked about this movie, where it's scenes like that, where it's just like they establish how much of a genius Bruce Wayne is, but there also is just simple issues with it where he just doesn't understand everything because he just hasn't had experience with that. It makes that character feel more human and grounded. And how can I go any further talking about this film without talking about probably my favorite point blank moment in this film, which is the bat chase sequence. I usually do not like when films have long car chases. I've never been a big fan of car chase sequences, and there's not one in the Batman series that stands out to me outside of The Dark Knight where they're chasing down the Joker. Outside of that, they've never really connected with me. Until this film. This film does a car chase sequence so brilliantly. One, it's because of Michael Giacchino's score, which I haven't said that enough in this review. Michael Giacchino's score in this film is absolutely brilliant. It is so imposing and feels such a character and adds so much weight and texture to Gotham. When this scene comes on, and this score is specifically called Highway to the Anger Zone, this score comes on, you see the Batmobile lighting up, you know what's about to become, and it just comes out in all of its glory in the rain, and it's just like the rain aesthetic mixed with the Batmobile, mixed with the blue flames, just comes out in such a great way, and it's this great chase scene through Gotham where you just feel the engine roaring. The sound mixing and editing is so well done in this film where your chair is just shaking when you get to see it. It's a scene that is so technologically brilliant that I was just in envy watching this scene. I was just like, this guy knows how to direct a Batmobile chase scene in a way that feels tense yet exciting. The adrenaline you feel is palpable in this scene, and it makes for this great 5-minute car chase where the Batmobile is going through cars, the Penguin's trying to make weird maneuvers. The rain allows the Batmobile to drift, and just you see the control that the Batmobile has with this. this engine that's just roaring in just a glorious way, mixed with the Giacchino score. It makes for this just brilliant moment in film that is so perfectly well done. I could not believe watching this how cool that sequence looked. It was so great to see. And it leads to my favorite Penguin moment, where Penguin thinks he kills the Batman, where he's had him crash, and then you just see the Batmobile fly through the flames, and Penguin reacts in just astonishment, can't believe what has just happened. The Batmobile hits Penguin. Penguin's car goes flipping, and you get this scene of Batman just walking up to the Penguin's car, and the camera's flipped upside down. Literally, Batman is a bat walking towards the Penguin. That's a moment where I'm just like, that is a singularly great shot of cinematography right there, with Batman upside down, cape blowing, walking towards the Penguin as fire engulfs him. That is a shot in it that I'm just like, God, they did such a brilliant job with that. And when Batman and Commissioner Gordon get to interact with the Penguin and interrogate him, it leads to this moment of just complete levity in the film, where they're pushing him up against the wall, trying to get him to admit that he is El Rata with wings, which leads to this moment that the whole time I was thinking that, I'm like, that's bad Spanish, it would be La Rata, which is eventually what Penguin points out. He's like, what are you talking about? That's La Rata. You didn't take Spanish? And he's just kind of mocking them. He's like, the world's greatest detective doesn't even know the difference between El and La. Colin Farrell kills him in this interrogation scene. It's that sequence where I'm just like, oh, he's a perfect Penguin. Just in a way that feels so over the top cartoonish, but perfectly grounded for who that character is within this world of this movie. And Batman comes to the realization that you are La Rata with wings, you are L, which I didn't get the first 2 times I saw the movie. I had to look it up on Reddit. It feels maybe like a step too far, but in the movie I was fine with it. Batman begins to realize that this is so much more than he thought, and that his family, the Waynes, connect to it. And it leads to this moment in the film where you actually think Alfred has died. This explosion. I love how they do it, where you think Batman is racing to it. The damage has already been done. Bruce Wayne's manor, the section where Alfred is at, is completely destroyed. And I thought in the film, I'm like, oh my God, they killed Alfred in this film. It was a decision that I actually did not like. I'm like, I don't think you should kill Alfred with just so little dynamic between the two of them shared. I think you need to have Alfred more. So I was happy to find out that they actually didn't kill him off right there, because while I do respect the bold creative decision they would have made in that moment, I was just like, then it makes Alfred such an underutilized character within this franchise, and the potential that he could have for other films leading forward. And just, it strips a part of Batman's mythology that I don't like, them stripping so far just for a really shocking kill. In this moment, it's where Bruce Wayne finally realizes that maybe Thomas and Martha Wayne aren't everything that he thought, and he learns that they're connected to Falcone, and that Thomas Wayne paid for the murder of a journalist who had information as Martha. They do it in this great way. I think the film does it in a way you don't fully realize what the answer is by the end of this film, because you get Falcone's version, which is the extreme. Thomas was in fear. He contacted me, and I made the decision and choice that Thomas could never make. Where Alfred paints it as a little bit more noble, that he had this moment of weakness, and when he found out that the Falcone might have done this, he was horrified and was going to go to the police. Moments like that is where it's just like, where is the full truth? Because I don't know if we get the full truth. I don't think it is. I think there's a part where Falcone is telling a little bit of the truth and Alfred's telling a little bit of the truth, and we don't actually fully realize what is Thomas Wayne's legacy in that moment. We don't know if he actually, what his motivations were. We're just probably more inclined to believe Alfred's because we want to believe that Thomas Wayne is noble, but in reality he makes a really terrible decision in that scene, and ones that has dire consequences, and it puts Bruce Wayne in this mindset of just spiraling until Alfred pulls him out of that downward spiral, and it kind of inspires Batman to realize that maybe vengeance isn't the answer. It's that moment of churning that happens. There is something more to justice than what Batman was seeking, which leads to the scene where Selina Kyle and Batman are working together to expose Falcone. I love this scene initially where Batman, Commissioner Gordon, and Selina Kyle are just on top of the rooftop, and has one of Gordon's men who is corrupt and who did kill Selina Kyle's lover / friend Annika. You're just sitting there for a minute and a half listening to a voicemail with Batman. It's Batman fully realizing, again, the scope of the situation and what this police officer who was supposed to uphold the law did for Falcone. Just the fact that Falcone is control. The police officer in that scene says, Falcone has been the mayor for the past 20 years. This election does not matter. He is power in this city. And Selina Kyle gets this moment where she's just about to shoot this officer point blank, and Gordon's kind of trying to stop her, and Batman grabs the gun and says, this cannot be the way, because then you're no better than Falcone. Leads to this moment where she has one of my favorite lines in the movie. It's felt so well suited for Catwoman, where she says, don't worry, I have 9 lives already, and she jumps off. It leads to this chase of Selina Kyle going to kill Falcone, who I just forgot to mention because there's so much of this movie. Falcone is her father who killed her mother, so Selina Kyle has this vengeance and hatred and belief that if she kills Falcone, she can save the city. So Batman has to chase after her, and it's this great moment when they're in the ice bar where it's cutting between both of the two of them. Matt Reeves directs it so seamlessly where there's this one action scene going on with Selina Kyle, cuts to the action scene with Batman. It's the perfect dynamic of the bat and the cat. And it leads to just one of my favorite sequences in the film where Batman is in the club and he shuts down all the music. There's the scene where Selina Kyle is going through a door, opens the elevator, and then pops right back seamlessly into Batman, taking out all these criminals. It's a scene where a lot less shown is a lot better, because it's just this light where you just see the gunshots reflecting off Batman and he takes down this whole hallway. It's such a badass moment where Batman just gets to just come out there, be the Batman, and have no fear. He's literally an immovable object, as Joker quotes him in The Dark Knight. He's sitting there taking the gunshots, taking them down one by one by one, while Selina Kyle is upstairs trying to deal with Falcone. Leads to this moment where she's about to kill Falcone. Batman comes in there and he says, we need to take him in the right way. And they have this tender moment, and it allows Selina to put down the gun. One of my favorite just goosebump scenes in the movie is where Jeffrey Wright's Gordon meets up with them, and Falcone says, I have the city on my side. Your men, the police, they're in my pocket. Door opens up and Gordon says, maybe not all of them. And it's just this swarm of police out there, all there to arrest Falcone. And it's this defeat in Falcone's face where he realizes he is going to pay for his crimes. Penguin comes out with a gun, says, you're the rat. I'm going to kill you. You're not going to make it the night. Gunshot rings out. Riddler is there, and that Batman has now brought Falcone into the light, allowing Riddler to shoot him. And Riddler was always just right above, waiting for that moment. They're looking through Riddler's house and they get a notification that Riddler is in the diner next door. They arrest him. And it leads to the scene where Batman goes into the prison cell of Riddler, and they have this classic Batman interrogation scene where he's trying to get the information out of Riddler. One of those moments that I just love of it so much is just Paul Dano's acting in this scene where he's just clapping his hands and he's saying, Bruce Wayne, Bruce Wayne. All of that. Just, it's so unnerving and creepy. And it's just this moment where you think he's taunting Batman with his identity, like, you are Bruce Wayne and I know it and I'm going to expose you. And Batman's kind of just breathing heavily, knowing what's about to happen. And then Riddler reveals he just didn't kill Bruce Wayne. And he realizes that in the Riddler's sick, demented mind, Riddler sees Batman as his ally. He thinks Batman is working for him, like they brought him out to the light. Batman is the reason Falco comes to justice. Batman then gives this whole thing like, you're the murderer, you're gonna die alone. Paul Dano just goes unhinged so quickly, where he's just yelling there, no, no, no. He can't believe that Batman is not his ally. And then he's like, we were supposed to watch the destruction together, making Batman realize there's something more to this plan. The plan being that Riddler is about to blow up the wall. And Riddler's men, the men who have been sitting there watching his live streams, they are all in Riddler gear in the arena, ready to just start killing people in wide numbers. They're going to kill the mayor, probably every police officer, and they're probably just going to start picking off citizens. And it becomes this moment in the third act where the third act really just fully becomes cemented. And I've heard criticisms against this third act. I love this third act. You do not get the film's satisfying conclusion without this third act happening in the way that it does, where Batman realizes that he, by being vengeant, has given voice to the villains of Gotham, where they see them together. And that's a moment where it panics Bruce Wayne, where he's just like, I can't become vengeance. They take after me. Riddler's bombs has detonated even though Riddler is in prison. Batman crashes in. He sees all of the Riddler's men. The mayor has been shot in her abdomen. Batman goes in there charging, taking down as many of them as he can. He's electrocuting them, doing everything to basically make sure that he can protect Gotham. And it's this moment where he gets shot, just full on blast, shotgun straight to the chest. He's dangling. Selina Kyle comes out, saves him. They share this kiss. It's a kiss that's very much an homage to Batman Returns, where they're both laying down and Selina Kyle kind of just licks Batman. It's not quite as sensual as that kiss in Batman Returns. I don't personally like to see Batman kissing. It's always such a weird idea where somebody so closed off and reclusive would kiss another person in a moment of intimacy that feels very weird to see Batman in. It's not necessarily that I don't like Batman having female love interest. It's just a moment where I'm just like, I never know how I feel about this. And it's been the same in every movie I've ever seen with Batman, any television show. It's always just weird to see Batman have a love dynamic, even though it adds a lot to the characters. Then Catwoman, she gets, the prisoner takes her, about to kill her, and is just beating the crap out of her. Batman, in this moment of just desperation, he grabs this like EpiPen that probably is shooting him with adrenaline, shoots it up in himself, goes out, throws the guy to the ground, and just beats the guy mercilessly, literally within seconds of death. And Gordon comes in there charging, like pulling him off, like saying, that's not how we do it, all that thing. And it's that moment where Batman just looks down, realizing like he almost killed the guy. The one rule that he isn't willing to break, he almost enacted it out of it. And he feels this kind of danger on himself, where he's just like, he realizes the weight of what that would have done, that he was about to just kill somebody. And it then leads to this moment where Batman can then go down, save all the people who have been flooded in this arena, sparks up this red light, leads them out of the water. It's the symbolization of just hope leading them, almost this moment of just Moses leading his people through the Red Seas to a new age. He is their savior at that moment. It's the first scene where Batman truly embodies hope, and it's this now sequence where Batman has to come to terms with the fact that he cannot be vengeance. He needs to be more for the city. He needs to symbolize hope. One of my favorite shots in the movie is where Batman is saving people from he's with the emergency response team and he's digging people out of the rubble. He's carrying this woman through a gurney, and it's that moment where she just looks up and kind of holds Batman's arm, where you just realize he now is something more to this city. He represents a hero, no longer a vigilante. And it's just such a perfect realization of Batman's character arc in the story. I just couldn't believe how perfectly that was done in this film. I absolutely love that. Just such a beautiful, intimate moment with Batman where he realizes what his true calling is in Gotham. It allows, I think, for this perfect transition of year one Batman, I guess year two Batman, to become the Batman that we are more familiar with as audiences. We're going to see a more traditional Batman, I would assume, in its sequel based on where it leaves off. And the film ends in just this shot. Could feel really cartoonish and overly dramatic in any other director, writer, and performer's hand, where Selina Kyle and Batman, they're going off in two separate ways, and they're riding their motorcycles, and Selina Kyle turns left while Batman turns right. And there's this moment where Batman just looks through his rear glass window and sees Selina Kyle going the other way. And there's this moment of just longing and sadness, this moment where he just realizes that this being the Batman means he can't have that type of normal relationship, something that he craves. And it's that commitment that he makes to, this is what I've put myself through, and this is what I'm going to do because I need to be that symbol for this town. It's such a beautiful, heartbreaking sequence that just encompasses everything that makes Batman such a powerful, perfect character and one of the most beloved in film history. and that's where the film ends. This film is wonderful. I've already hit on so many points of why I love this movie, and I'll just reiterate a few of them that I maybe didn't get to touch on a lot. Cinematography looks great. The action sequences are amazing throughout the film, even if they are not abundant. They look straight out of the Arkham video games, and I mean that in the best way. Michael Giacchino's score is incredible. The Batman score at the very end of the film is just so beautiful, just so haunting, full of dour and sad. The pain within him. It's such a perfectly realized, accompanies the movie in such a beautiful way. And with that all being said, I cannot wait to see where Pattinson takes this role next. I cannot wait to see him embody this character again. And I'm hoping that when the sequel comes, we get a little bit more from his character as Bruce Wayne. Again, it didn't bother me in this movie. I just think in a sequel, that's where we really get to explore Bruce Wayne, which, look at movies like Good Time, Tenet. This guy can pull off that charismatic billionaire really well. I look forward to seeing that. I don't know if I want the Joker to be in the next film, even though they're kind of teasing it. I think they're holding it off. I want the Joker to be an overarching character without being the main character just yet. But whatever Matt Reeves and them decide to do, I'm in for it. I love this movie. I've seen it twice already, and I can't wait to see it again. That's my review of the Batman. It's been a long one, but I just had so much to say. It's a 3-hour movie. It is deserving of its runtime, even though it feels long. I was sitting in the movie. This is not one of those ones where it's like, oh, it's 3 hours, but it feels like 2.5 hours. It feels like 3 hours. It is an investment, and it's an investment in the best way possible. Matt Reeves, Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Jeffrey Wright, Paul Dano, Colin Ferrell, they made something really special with this movie, and I am in love with this movie and the decisions that they make, and I can't wait for more. Give me more. That's my review of the Batman. So guys, it's been a long video, but thank you for listening, and let me know what you thought of the Batman, and who do you want to see in the next Batman movie? Who are the villains that you want to see in the next one? I'm personally rooting for a Mr. Freeze, or maybe even a Mad Hatter would be kind of where I want to see this series go, but we'll see where it goes, and I'm on board for anything. Thank you for listening. I'm Ben from the Beniverse. Follow me on the Beniverse on Twitter, Instagram. Check out Ben and Bran See a Movie every Friday, 9 a.m. We're about to start our Wild Wild West podcast, which focuses on the career of Wes Anderson. Get ready for that. Check that out on our podcast feed. And thank you guys for listening. More reviews to come. Thank you. Bye-bye.